All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Simply Cyber Live, the Thursday long form interview show where I, Gerald Dozier, bring on cybersecurity professionals across the industry for them to share their experience, their knowledge, their story with you, and overall have a really good time. So, if you're into good times, you're in for a great show today. We're going to be joined by a friend of mine, a fellow former, peer, I guess. I don't know what the right word is, but we both went through the PhD program at Dakota State University together. Dr. Keith Jones, he's a principal security researcher at Corelight. He's got a lot of hobbies, got a side project that he's working on right now that we're going to spend some time talking about. Really, really interesting guy. You're in for a treat. Standard issue. If you have questions during the show, fire them in chat. I will do my best to get them in front of Keith. The goal here is to learn as much as we can from Keith and have a good time doing it. So let me go ahead and grab Keith and let's get right into the show. What's up, Keith? How are you? Or Dr. Jones, if I may.
You don't have to call me Dr. Jones, but thanks. Thanks for having me on. I'm doing well.
Absolutely, man. So I said it in the show. You and I actually, some people may not know this, but Keith and I actually graduated together. Like we walked together at the same time through ceremony, even though Keith started. I think you started like a year after me in the program, but you like went gangbusters with the course load. So definitely good. How have things been since we last saw each other at graduation?
Uh, Good. And I do have to say up front, I have to say R.I.P. Wayne Pauli, who actually
Yeah.
introduced us at DSU where we went to school. And yeah, he passed away about a year ago. And I was just thinking about him when I was when I was thinking about the courses and stuff that we went through together. And I remember him introducing you and I, because we were actually different years. I came
Mhm.
in the year after you, and I was more of a, I guess, a like a malware researcher. So like some of the courses we took were similar, like the researchy courses, but then I took more of the. You did you take reverse engineering and stuff like that too?
Yeah, yeah. I took it reverse engineering, software exploitation, malware analysis,
Yep,
the
yep,
advanced ones of those. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So,
So,
but yeah, go ahead, please.
oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I just wanted to give a shout out to Wayne because miss him too.
Yeah, it's a great point. And just so, for those who don't know, Wayne Pauli, he was like at Dakota State University forever, and he was like a fixture at the school. His wife Krista was the dean of the education school over there, and Wayne was the program coordinator for the PhD program. Like Pat Ingerbretson and Josh Pauli kind of got the program initialized and set up, but you need someone when you set these things up to kind of shepherd it and make sure it stays on the rails. And that was what Wayne did. So I owe quite a bit to Wayne Pauli. Plus, he let me stay at his house whenever I'd go out there, which was always a good time. So yeah, thanks a lot. So Keith, speaking about your interests and stuff, I've had a couple people in the community ask me about my dissertation. Can you briefly share what your dissertation was about? See if folks are interested. I'm going to pull up a link to it too while you're talking.
Sure thing. So back during that time, I was in school between it was 2016 and 2019. So malware. I know we see AI all the time now because of Chat GPT and all that, but
Right.
machine learning and AI were a little newer back then, at least in the malware sense of things. And what my dissertation was, companies up until that point, until I started my dissertation, were getting into the research of saying this malware is, or this sample, this computer program that you have, this is either malware or it isn't. It would either convict it or it wouldn't, but it wouldn't tell you what it was. So my dissertation was to try to take the next step. And when you know that something is going to be malware, try to classify it. Try to say, this thing is a bot, or this thing is an info stealer, or this thing is a Trojan. And it's been a while since I've done it, but I think it was like 6 or 8 categories. I went out there and tried to pick the most useful categories from things like virus total and tried to make these very generic categories about all these different types of malware. And then I went out and downloaded tens of thousands of pieces of malware and then did computations on them in order to do the machine learning so that at the end of the day, I could then show, when I put this malware through all these different types of machine learning algorithms, some would detect better than others. And that's what the study was to figure out that problem. But I also, along that route, you learn a lot of things in your dissertation. I learned there was no good way to do a prior literature comparison. They just kind of vaguely compared algorithms to other algorithms. So I also came up with a method to put a level playing field for all these malware classifiers that would say things like, okay, we expect X amount of bits coming in here, Y amount of bits coming out of there. This is a function, this is a matrix, and basically put a process and a system in place to say this is a generic classifier. And when we talk about a classifier, we can then put details of those different components to talk about specific classifiers. And then at the end of the day, you give it some malware, and the dissertation would say, oh, this is a bot. And then I was able to also compare that to prior literature, which is important in your PhD program.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. We never talked about this, Keith, but I felt personally that the dissertation, because I've had a lot of people, not a million people, but I've had a lot of people ask me about a PhD and going through a PhD. For me, the course load was the course load, and that was very similar to a master's or anything else. The crux is the dissertation and the experience. For me, my dissertation was incredibly lonely and arduous and just frustrating at times. It was almost like an emotional gauntlet, that as much as it was like a thought exercise. I don't know if you experienced that. Like I said, we never really talked about it, but I spent a lot of time, getting frustrated and being alone. And so what was your experience like?
Well, I will say, first of all, that at least my experience in the dissertation is kind of mirrors what I do research wise. And we'll talk more about that a little later, but the same processes and feelings and thoughts that you go through when you do that dissertation still happens to me in research now. And it's interesting that the things that they teach you for your dissertation, like do your prior literature review. Well, when you get in the real world, you go, I don't need to do that. I'm going to go do this other thing. I'm just going to jump right. I did that a couple of times, and I ended up screwing myself over. And someone else was like, hey, did you see this paper? And I was like, I should have done a deeper literature review on it. So the stuff they teach you is actually, I find, useful in my everyday job. But the one thought that I remember was I had a full-time job and I was going to school at the same time. So full-time job during the day, school basically at night and weekends. And I remember going through the literature review, and I looked at 70 or 80 different other articles or methodologies when I compared it. So the stuff they teach you compared it.
Hit the like button. That sounded like my voice.
Why is this on my phone? 1 second here. Let me shut this off.
No problem. And while
I think I had your live stream queued up for a friend, and it just took off. And I could hear myself. Okay, sorry about that. So what I was saying is, the one pervasive thought that I had the whole time was, oh my God, I'm spending so much time doing this stuff. It wasn't hard. It was just so much time. When you do those prior literature reviews, it's not it could be a technical exercise, but a lot of it is just organization.
Yeah.
Finding the articles, putting them in order, figuring out which ones you got to read, which ones you need to skim and do the comparison. But all that stuff, it takes days. And I remember going through the literature review, and that was a major chunk of it, and going, when am I going to actually get to the points of where my research is? And it doesn't happen really until halfway through your dissertation, maybe, or a third of the way through your dissertation.
Well, yeah. So it's between step 3 and 4, basically. Yeah, it's a boatload of work. It's a lot of divergence. It gets tricky when you're going to do the convergence on that. So just to share a real personal story with chat. So you guys are lucky because you get to hear this, and it's really embarrassing. You got to remember this, Keith. So Keith is talking about literature review, which is basically the exercise of going and looking what other people have formally written, right? Like what academically sound research has been done on a topic. And you go through it and you do all these other things. Now, to Keith's point, organization is absolutely critical because you got to know what was the key thing that came from this. You need to be able to cite it. You need to be able to do all these things. So there are softwares called like EndNote or Mendeley. Is it Mendeley?
Mendeley, yeah.
Yeah, Mendeley. Those are the two popular ones. But basically, think of it as just like a digital Rolodex for papers, right? It keeps a link to the paper, the author, all the citation stuff. So it makes it at the end when you have to do your bibliography, which has hundreds of citations, it makes it easy, right? Okay, now that you guys know what this is, let me tell you. I think I started my dissertation before Keith, okay? So I started on EndNote, and once you get onto a platform, it's very difficult to roll back out of it or to transition. I mean, it's not exactly super hard, but for me, it was hard. Okay, so Keith did Mendeley, and you don't really talk about these things. It's just like a tool in your toolbox. Well, Keith and I both went to Dakota State University. You have to go a couple times while you're there, and as like I don't know, like a knowledge transfer or a gift or whatever you want to call it for the students who are coming into the program, Keith and I gave a talk on how we use EndNote and Mendeley, right? So the two solutions that are basically out there, here's how you use it and here's how to pros and cons and whatnot. Now, the problem is I went first, okay, which I wish I hadn't. I had multiple slides. I had like workarounds. Like the program is kind of janky. So like I'd have to like right click and then save the PDF off and then drag it into Mendeley afterwards to make like I had all these workarounds and workflows and processes. And I was very proud of it because I had figured it out. And I give this like long technical like demonstration. And then they're like, oh, very nice, Jerry. Very nice. And then they're like, all right, Keith Jones on Mendeley. And Keith's like, okay, like you just grab the PDF and drag it in, and then like on screen, like everything just pulls out, and it was like everything I had done except automated. And his entire talk was like 15 seconds, and he's like, and that's why you use it. And everybody's like, boo, EndNote, like, and I was like, oh my god, like what? So
if I remember right, I switched to Mendeley because EndNote kept crashing on me all the time. I would get right into where you had to be, and I'm about to cite something or whatever, and then it would just go and just like freeze up on my Mac, and I'd be like, and then eventually I was like, I gotta go to another program, and that's when I found that.
Yeah. So true story. I still to this day like hear EndNote and get like PTSD kind of traumas. But let's switch topics. Keith, we had a question in chat from Carrie, and it looks like chat's been talking quite a bit about this. Carrie's doing a cybersecurity certificate from Google, and he doesn't have like high powerful compute stuff, but he wants to learn how to use a SIM. Now I know a SIM is part of your world. Do you have any suggestions on maybe a SIM that could be useful for learning, but is also not, a resource pig?
Okay. Let me start with the free ones first. And I, for years, have used Elastic. And I know it's not technically a SIM. I mean, that's not how it started. It started out as just a generic log indexer. Mm-hmm. And I used it for file lists on digital forensic projects. I'd put like computers worth of file lists in. I would put network data in there, and you could basically do all the same type of stuff that you could do in a SIM if you're handy and you're technical and you want to put a little bit of time into it. Now I'm giving you this one first because it's the free one. It's the open source one. If you don't want to spend any money and it's not a real big resource hog, you can, either scale it up or scale it down. That would be a place where I would start, because you could just start to get some understanding in there about how these tools work if you don't want to spend money. If you want to go to a commercial product and then possibly use like a demo, I think I call it Humio because that's how I learned it, and CrowdStrike owns it now. And I want to say it's Logarithm. I can't remember the full name on it, but they changed it, and it's
Mhm.
log something. I think it's Logarithm. I'll probably say Humio throughout here, and I apologize, but Humio is what I used probably the most for commercial sim. And you know, where I work, we have a partner with CrowdStrike, so we use it a lot.
Mhm.
I like that one, assuming you know you're gonna want to go out and spend dollars on obtaining this. I like that one because there's a lot of simplicity to it. It's missing some of the stuff that I kind of like in Elastic when I want to get real funky and do something real deep. It's made more, I think, more for a broader audience, and it works really well. I haven't had a lot of issues with it. So if you can get that set up in a Docker container, and I would recommend a Docker container also for Elastic if you want to try that. But if you set these things up in a Docker container, you can then, you know, pipe X amount of data into it. And I couldn't tell you what Humio has, but I know like Splunk has a 50 gig per day demo license where you can try it out. I think Humio has a very similar one, at least for their online version. I haven't checked recently to see if their Docker container has a demo for it, but their online version, if you have something like a network security monitor that will send to a SIEM, you can send it to the their cloud version. And from what I remember, they would give you about a week's worth of data. They would give you X amount of gigabytes or a time length. That's sort of the free container that they give you.
Mhm.
And you can keep like a week's worth of logs there, which is pretty good for free. And you can learn how to do all sorts of searching through their language. And I will say, once you learn a sim, you kind of learn that language. And then once you go to another one, you got to learn that language. But there's some similarities. I could take things that I knew from Elastic and apply them to Humio with very few lookup Googles.
And Jamal's saying in chat he used to work in a SOC and Wuzza and Alien Vault have free versions worth checking out. I saw some other people in chat mentioning Wuzza. Sean said that he remembers setting up Elk and not meaning much on the resource intense side. So there's some good
And you could,
options.
and with Elk, if you all of a sudden have new computers, you can actually start new processes and they just join the cluster and it just automatically works. It just starts distributing your data across it. And it's real nice.
That's awesome. Um, Elastic is open source, right? Wesley wants to know. I think if you just Google Elk, right? Elk Stack is
I
in
think it's
GitHub.
Elastic. I want to say it's elastic.co.
All right. Yeah, we could check elastic.co. Let's take a look really quickly. Real time. Elastic. Oh yeah, it definitely is. Here we go, Keith. Keith pulling it right out of his brain there. No big deal.
I used to go there a lot.
That's funny. There we go. Yeah, drop it in chat for you, Wesley. Very cool. Switching, since you are a principal cyber security researcher, if someone wanted to get into security research, what would they focus on? Cyber Munchkin, who's a student, wants to know.
Well, first pick what you're interested in because there's a lot of different topic areas. So I've bounced around in a few of them. The three main ones in my work background are going to be digital forensics, malware analysis, and then network security monitoring analysis. So think like, I don't know if your viewers are used to the open source tool called Zeek, but it's a tool that you can put on your network and you can write code in order to look for different things. So depending on what it is you want to do, there's a lot of room for you. You know, digital forensics is a whole group of people that a lot of times you don't even run into the network side of the house until they kind of come together at an incident, and you have people monitoring networks, and you have like your EDR or your digital forensic people. So once you pick that will help you decide how you're going to get into it. Then I recommend probably networking with people, obviously networking with people in that focus in that area. If it's,
yeah, for sure.
secure network security monitoring. I work with an individual named Vern Paxson that's very well known in that area. Getting and for me, it's super beneficial to be able to work with him because he's one of the best out there in this space. So my recommendation is to try to find those people you want to learn from in whatever that topic area it is that interests you. Now, I will say sometimes real life catches up with you and you can't really pick your topic area. You get hired at a company and they do something and it's not really that it's not your favorite topic area. And I will say that at least in cybersecurity, there's a lot of room still that you can still work for companies that may not be on your primary list of research topic areas, but you can still learn a lot in your topic area. For instance, I work at Corelight, and Corelight makes network security monitoring sensors and software. So in my day job, I develop things like DNS, exfil, detectors, right? And they're very complex information theory measurement algorithms that run on big scale network data. But as a side project, I get to work on malware detectors, which is something I think is kind of fun. I get to write, a detector on detecting a C2 network data on, today I just released one for GOZI, and then there's one for Amity I released a while ago, and NJRAP. So I still get to tie it into my work, which is network security monitoring, but I get to work on malware, which is something that's just, I think, fun to work on. And that's what if you can't land at the spot where it has your topic that you want to work on, do keep in mind that you can still work for them and still fill out that interest that you are looking for in security research.
Yeah, a great response. And just to kind of call out one, so this is work that Keith just released today. This is a YouTube video for his YouTube channel. So this is 27-minute. This says Zeek Roulette 3. So what are we doing here, Keith? Do you have a series of Zeek videos or?
I do. So at the beginning, I tried to come up with the name of what it was I was doing. And what I was doing was basically going to any.run, which is kind of like a competitor to VirusTotal, if you've seen VirusTotal. And kind of like a roulette, I would go to their submissions list and start looking down there and go, hey, that malware looks interesting. Look a little further. Hey, that malware looks interesting. And I kind of picked it out of there like a roulette. And once I got into it, I said, all right, I want to write a Zeek detection for it. And Zeek being that open source tool that I told you about before, it's its own language that you can craft what it is you want to alert on. I saw somebody talk about Suricata earlier. Think of that, but it's like that on steroids. You can do a lot more with the connections than you can do with something like Suricata. So what I did is in this video and the other roulettes, and I call them roulettes because I just took like a malware family that I just randomly found on a service and wrote a detection for, or basically walked you through my thought on how I wrote a detection from, PCAP or network capture in hand all the way to I have notices firing and I'm getting alerts and I'm actually getting actionable data out of this. And I walk you through, analyzing the C2 data, how you can go to your prior logs and search for them, to how you take that logic and then write a Zeek script and get it live on your network.
That's awesome. So would it be fair to say that in these videos, it's almost like you're practically showing how one could write their own, like, because they could follow it along as like a step by step to write their own Zeek. What do you call them? Signatures? What do you call them?
I call them detections because signatures typically, people when you say signatures, you think of IDS.
Yeah.
And Zeek is actually it's its own programming language where you have events that you can handle. You have hooks and functions, and it's an event-oriented environment that you can code in. So, I call them detections because of that. But what was the original question? Sorry, I thinking
No,
of
no,
tangent
I
on
was
you.
pointing out that people, if someone was watching this and they wanted to learn
Oh yeah,
Zeek, they could follow your video as like it's basically a tutorial because you're making real detections, but you go through the entire workflow and thought process behind it, right?
exactly. And my hope is that someone will learn how to do this, and then someday when I needed something and I do a search Zeek on whatever the protocol or detection is, I go, hey, look, Bob wrote one, and hopefully Bob saw this and learned. And that way I don't have to write it in the future. I taught somebody else how to write
I love
it.
it. So is there like a I mean, do people post their detections to GitHub or is there some type of like, accepted Zeek store type thing?
there there is. Let me give you a URL.
Yeah, if you drop it in private chat, I'll pull it up. And I'll tell you, Keith, and I'll tell chat this. Guys, I've said this on the channel before, but like nobody knows everything in the industry. Like you can't even begin. It's too much, too big. With Zeek, it used to be called Bro. Like back in the day, it was called Bro, and then they rebranded it for reasons. And I have tried. I know, like I talked to a couple people who are in SOX, and I talked to John Hoyt, who's the CISO at Clemson University. And I was like, dude, if you had one tool, like what would be like the one tool that you would refuse to give up? And he's like, Zeek, all day, every day, Zeek. It gives the best. It gives the best telemetry. And I tried so hard to like implement it and understand what it was. And to this day, I know exactly what it does. Like I can explain it, but I can't wrap my head around where it goes in my environment. So, anyways,
It
that's admission to you. Yeah.
I was going to say, it can go pretty much anywhere you want it. On your network, you could watch east-west traffic internal and use Zeek to detect things, or even just to see how much traffic or what types of traffic you have going across. You can do it north-south, watching things go in and out of your enterprise. You could take a Docker container of Zeek and put it in front of one of your cloud resources and monitor that too. So you could pretty much put it wherever you want. And I will tell you, Zeek is very complicated. So
Yeah.
it's one thing to be like myself and to write software for Zeek, but there's a whole group of people that concentrate on just getting Zeek working at scale on these really large networks, because you have, network taps, and you have, these sensors with like 30 some odd processes watching 30 different basically splits out of your network tap, and it's just a beast. And that's part of the reason why companies like Corelight are out there, is to make that process easier. Because for guys like you and me, we might take Zeek and install it at our enterprise, maybe just for curiosity purposes.
Yeah.
But even just for, IT security purposes, we may install it to give us telemetry, and we may be able to do that because we're technical. But there's a whole subset of folks out there that don't want to learn how to make Zeek talk in a ring fashion to all these virtual network taps in order to get all your network data in there. And then you got to make sure you have enough processing power so you don't drop packets, and it can get really, really hairy.
Yeah. A lot of people echoing, like taking it in class and not getting it, wanting to take it over. Krista K. Hall wants to get into ChatGPT, get on that AI train. I love it. No, it's very cool. And it looks like here's that, I guess Zeek store for detections that Keith joined. So if you're in the know, this is where you go.
Yeah. Type in the search box BOA.
All right.
And there might be something that says like a BOA detector.
Right here, vulnerable BOA web server detector.
Yeah, I wrote that one. If you click that. So this is an example that I wrote a while back. And there was a vulnerable server out there, and one of our customers did not know that they were running this server. So as a researcher, I get to monitor a bunch of customers. And so when I was testing this package, I actually put it out there, and we caught one. We caught one where there was a vulnerable server that they did not know that they had, that someone just put on their network, and it was just out there in the wind. And, it's things like this that if you just go through the package the Zeek package repository and look for the different things you want to detect or do. There's a lot of stuff already there for you.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'll drop a link in chat to everybody here for this Zeek App Store. Let me, I mean, what do you guys call it? Do you call it, I mean, I guess it's not really an app store, but
it's just packages. And this is, gosh, I don't know. There's a ZKG, which is kind of like pip for Python. If you're a Python coder,
yeah,
it's basically the same thing for Zeek, where you say, hey, I'm running Zeek, but now I want to put this BOA detector in my Zeek installation, sort of like I want to get this library and put it in my Python installation.
I see. So you just like do like a git pull. You're not really going through the GUI front end.
Yeah, you just type a ZKG install and then whatever the package name is, and it automatically goes out there, gets it, installs it for you.
That makes sense. Got to live on the command line, right? I love it. We did have a question from Sherry. I mean, this is a bit of a departure from what we're talking about, but she wants to know if you're with row hammer and bit flipping, if you got any thoughts around the row hammer vulnerability.
I haven't studied them. Can you refresh my memory?
I'm pretty sure row hammer is a side channel attack. Again, I wasn't prepared for this question. I think row hammer is a side channel attack where you're able to flip bits because you're able to physically manipulate basically bits on a chipboard and be able to influence it in some meaningful way. And you can't really solve for it because it's a side channel attack.
Yeah, I've just on the periphery seen these types of hardware types of attack. I haven't spent a lot of time in there, so I don't really have a lot of information on it.
Yeah, you live more in the software malware, right? I mean, that's like your jam.
Yeah, for years I did some malware stuff. I did a lot of computer forensics, so I know the low-level details on like file systems and stuff like that. And then with the malware for a few years, not only do I look at it from a reverse engineering standpoint, but in my network security monitoring life now, I also see it from the network side of things that I didn't really pay attention to back when I was just doing reverse engineering. So yeah, there's a lot of ways of looking at it.
I forgot about this. So hey, here's a quick for people in chat who are like, who is this guy? Let me show you this. I forgot about this. And look, way to go, Amazon, for remembering. I bought this in 2011. So before I even met Dr. Keith Jones, he had published this book. It kills me that. And this is
2005.
Yeah, 2005.
Yeah, I work. Richard Baitlick. He works at Corelight with me now.
Oh, does he? Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, Baitlick's awesome. I don't know Curtis Rose, but I'm sure he's a fine person. But yeah. Keith Jones, you want to talk about the guy who wrote the book on digital forensics? We're talking to him right now. It's cool.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that book was a lot of fun because back in 2005, there was no actual real evidence for you to practice with. So we talked the publisher into producing a DVD with actual evidence that we produced. And Richard always pulls out the pictures of us like in this computer lab. Back in the day when you had a bunch of towers, like that was the only way you could have a lab to run what we needed to run to get the data for the book.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, just because I've written a book too. What are your thoughts about writing a book? Would you recommend it to someone?
Back in 2005, yeah, I thought about it. So when we finished with our PhD, I was like, I go through a lot of information and it doesn't go anywhere. I want to put it somewhere. And I thought about a book, but I felt like a lot of work to get the same type of ideas out that I could either with a blog or videos. And that's kind of why I opted that way. And, with a book, if you want somebody to read your book, they got to go out and buy the book. Usually a book is thick. People nowadays, they don't want to read a whole book. They just want the little section that pertains to them. And we're so much more of a, bite-sized society than we were in 2005. Yeah,
snackable bites. 100% agree with you. I'm on YouTube. You won't, unless it's like a tutorial follow-along video, you won't find videos that are like more than 15 minutes on my channel because it's just, at that point, you're diminishing returns. But speaking of ways for you to put information out there, Keith, let's talk a little bit about your podcast. So, guys, I'll drop a link to this in chat, but Keith started this podcast not too long ago. Keith, what was the impetus behind this, and what's the podcast about for people to understand and appreciate?
Sure. So I'm a true crime junkie. If you were ever to catch me watching TV, it's probably going to be, Crime and Investigation Channel, ID, Discovery Channel. So back last fall, I was like, how could I combine this true crime and what I do with electronic crime and have it be fun and actually hopefully make people want to listen to it? Now, I say this, like what you're doing here, Jerry, this is entertaining. So I'm not trying to like say this is everybody, but it's like a lot of cybersecurity stuff is really dry, right?
Yeah.
It's like policies or numbers, and it's just really, really boring. And people, they want to hear it to keep themselves safe, but they don't want to really spend a ton of time listening to it. So I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a podcast that's true crime related, that probably 80+% of the podcast itself is just fun storytelling about the computer crime.
Mm-hmm.
And then I sneak in maybe like 10 to 20% of technical stuff that you don't really know that I'm talking about, like SIM swapping and how, you need to worry about SIM swapping because somebody can take over your accounts, right? And I'm going to be totally honest with you. When I started this, I had no idea how absolutely crazy some of these cases are that I researched. I started out with some of them, and they're, the first few I talked about, like there was like a group
season 1 episode. Holy crap! What's the naming convention? What are these nibbles? Are the
All
nibbles
right,
like little teasers?
I'll get to that in a second. So
Okay.
we started out doing episodes, and I'm a researcher and I get really deep. So our episodes are about an hour, and if they try to go over an hour, I try to split it in 2 parts. And I'm saying this is our season 1, by the way. Oh, we started this in February. So season 1's a half a year for me. We're starting season 2 now. This is July when we're doing this. So they were kind of long, and when they're longer, you can kind of make them more lighthearted, and you can tell the story and you can make them more interesting. But I also found that not everybody wanted to listen to something that was long. So I figured out in my research pipeline that I'm looking at short blips of cases up front to even figure out if these cases are worth later on having a full episode about. So what I did is I have these nibbles kind of tucked in between when I find interesting cases. Like there was, a case in there about a CEO hacking another employee that left his company, right? And at the time when I first researched it, I don't have a ton of information about it, but it's interesting. It just happened. So what I do is I publish an eCrimeBytes nibble that just says, hey, I found this case. I might crack a joke or two, but it's a very generic. This case just came on my radar. It's pretty cool. It's a 3 to 7 minute nibble, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then if I figure out the audience kind of likes it, I'll get comments on it. I'll be like, hey, I never heard of this case. Totally interesting. Then it moves up my chain of, okay, this is worth making a full episode on. And then I'll make a deeper episode on it. And that's when my co-host, Seth Eichenholz, and I will take one of those shorter nibbles and we'll go deep on it. Well, he's an attorney, by the way. So when we talk about it, I'm the technical guy. He's technical, but probably not as technical as myself, but he has a law degree. So he can talk about things that I can't with, the statutes of this and that when people are arrested and so forth. So what we've been doing is taking one of these cases and then following it kind of from A to Z of where the attacker, where we can trace where an attacker starts through to the end of them being caught. Did they go through court? Did they get punished? Did they actually go to prison? What did they serve? That kind of stuff. And we just try to run the story from that beginning to that end in whatever topic it is. And we have topics from everything. So I told you about SIM swapping, and we started with that, and that was fun. But then we talked about an individual named Plugwalk Joe that you've probably seen in the news recently, got extradited back to the U.S. Well, we did a whole episode on him before he was sent back to the U.S. That's one of our more popular episodes. Complete, total, just jerk of a person, hacked everybody, sexually assaulted young people online, like virtually sexually, what do you say? Like targeted them.
Yeah.
Like he did everything. So you have those kind of cases. And then I was like, this is too serious. We can't be doing all these type of deep cases. So I would switch gears to doing, there was a naval nuclear secrets case that we worked on that was here in Annapolis. That's where I live. And we got to talk about all the technology that they use to try to keep themselves secret, but the FBI pulled them out of the internet and basically were like, hey, we need a dead drop. Right? So it's like we
is this
try to hit all these.
Yeah, was that the story with the engineer who like coordinated with his wife to sell nuclear secrets? Yeah.
They lived right down the street from me. That
Not
was
anymore.
a local case here. Yeah, exactly. So what I'm saying is we take all these different types of cases, even if you don't like a SIM swapping case, if you don't like a plug walk Joe case, if you don't like, the nuclear secrets case, we've got all types of cases. There's one that I named threesomes and hitmen because this doctor thought he was basically the next 50 Shades of Grey, but he also wanted somebody murdered and their hands broken, and he did it all over the dark web, and we investigate that. So like I said, there's just every case. It's just, I get into these cases, I'm like, this will be interesting. And by the time I get to the end, I'm like, this is just the most absolute crazy story I've ever read. And we tried to present them in that fashion to you too.
I love it. So if you like true crime and you like cyber, which you definitely do if you're here, check out eCrimeBytes, Keith Jones's podcast that he's doing with, what was your friend's name, the lawyer?
Seth Eichenholz. I'm not even going to spell
okay.
the
Just
last
look
name
for
for
Keith
you.
Jones.
Just Seth. Keith and Seth.
Keith and Seth.
I will say that so we just started up season 2, and I'm going to try something a little different. And I'm open to feedback, by the way. We don't have a ton of listeners. I mean, I would say probably less than 100 listeners. So if you like to hear certain cases or want to hear them a different way, chat with me because I like to hear feedback. And the feedback I got from season 1 was people don't always want to put in an hour or 45 minutes into it. So what I'm going to try to do, and I hope it works, is I'm going to keep them detailed, but I'm going to break them up into smaller segments. So maybe like a Tuesday, you'll get the case from the beginning all the way up to the point where the police get involved. And then we'll have, the next section will be when the police get involved all the way up to court, and then maybe court through punishment, and try to make them in shorter, more digestible bites like that throughout the week.
I love it. And I by no means am my wife is big into true crime, so by association, I know a lot more about that genre than I probably should. But I'll tell you, just as constructive feedback, there is a woman on YouTube named Bailey Sarian, and she does true crime things, but she also like puts makeup on. So basically, she's just like sitting there putting makeup on and telling a true crime story. And that woman's YouTube channel is like exploded. So I'm not saying get into putting makeup on, Keith, but I'm saying precedent has been set.
Hey, well, I did, all I could do was just wear a cool t-shirt for you today.
Yep. Hey, lady, call me Dr. Jones. Absolutely. So that is one of the really cool things, too. If you like Indiana Jones and the whole Dr. Jones thing, if your name is Keith Jones and you do earn a PhD, you can also be Dr. Jones.
Finally. Yeah, I got to wear this to the opening of the one that just came out. And, as a middle-aged man, that was the most exciting thing that's going to happen to me in 2023.
I love it. So, dude, what kind of? I mean, obviously, you've got the podcast, you've got the YouTube channel, which is with the podcast, you have seasons and pretty deliberate, consistent posts. On the YouTube channel, are you consistently posting? Because when I just looked on your YouTube channel, it looked like there was a couple different pieces of content.
So the podcast is video as well. So I have Yeah, so what you were showing was the Podbean, which is the audio side, and that's how we started. We did audio only up to I think like episode 7,
Mm-hmm.
and then I was like, Seth, we're already putting in this effort. Why don't we just push out to video as well? And we started doing it around episode 7. So if
Oh
you
yeah.
like to watch video, we have slides and things, and we actually put up like communications between people, like the things we talk about that you hear in audio. We actually have pictures of them.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm scrubbing through eCrimeBytes season 1, episode 20, part 1. I see.
That's our season review that we just closed it up.
Oh,
Yeah, so
oh, oh. I chose a bad
that
one.
one we were talking about basically all the different cases that we went through that year. So if you want to recap, that's actually a good episode to
Oh,
hit.
and this is nice. It looks like you've put markers down here. Yeah.
I tell you, you have no idea how much work I put into all the chapters. I go through all the closed captionings and try to make it as 100% as possible. I push them out to YouTube so that way YouTube's algorithm doesn't mess up all my technical words. You actually see the technical words in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I take my transcripts and I put them on my blog in case people don't want to watch the video but just want to read the transcripts. So there's a lot of data out there.
Jeez, dude. Yeah, you're giving it to the community, dude. I appreciate it. This is Keith Jones, drkeithjones.com's website too. So you can definitely consume this in many different ways. In fact, you can even listen to it right here, watch the video right here. This is excellent,
If you
Keith.
scroll, keep going almost to the bottom. Go through the transcript almost to the bottom. I'll show you some hidden gems
Okay.
all the way to the bottom. Oh, yep, there you go. So those are my trailers. So anytime we have like little jokes or things, I try to cut them out and put trailers and make YouTube shorts out of them.
Okay.
And then I just stick them at the bottom. So if you just want to go find the funny parts, I try to make like less than a minute clips of just the funny parts.
Okay. Let me see if I can. Well, I try to hit the share button. Let's see what I can do here. 29-second. Oh, I see. Yeah, the current situation is untenable. I can't click the share button. I'm trying, but it's not working, unfortunately. But
Well,
yeah,
that
you can go to
I can tell you that
drkeithjones.com.
joke. I
Yeah,
can
go
tell
ahead.
you that joke. The current situation is untenable. So the criminal in that case could not spell, and we had to read all his communications, and he would mix up here and here, there, and there. Like he would mess up everything. And then from this criminal, there was an email that came out with the word untenable in there. And I was like, no way. There's no way that dude wrote that because he can't even write here, and here. It had, so you see the lady on there. That's his girlfriend. She's a lawyer. And I was like, she had to write that because she would know the word untenable. And obviously the guy didn't because he couldn't even spell here, and here when he was threatening people.
Yeah, that's definitely a tall tale sign. What, dude? If you can't spell, you might want to not try to commit crimes and think you're gonna get away with them. You know?
Yeah.
God. So I love it. I love it. What so okay, we're almost at time. We got like 10 more minutes left. A couple questions in chat. We can take it a couple places, Keith. We can take it to some security research work that you've been working on. We could take it on maybe another project that we haven't talked about. Maybe if you're going to conferences coming up, it is conference season, those type of things. What suits your fancy?
Well, I would tell you, I unfortunately, the reason why I publish so much on YouTube now, I had a very serious operation last year. So
Hmm.
I don't do a lot of traveling anymore. So you're going to see a lot more, I think, videos and blogs and things like that out of me because that's sort of how I can go out and do things without
Hmm.
actually having to physically go out and brave the world. I had spinal surgery last year, if you're curious.
Hmm. Hmm.
So conferences, I don't have a lot on my plate that I can talk about, but I can talk about. I'm happy to answer questions from your audience on how to get in the industry. I'm
Yep.
happy to talk about, any of the malware detections that we've done recently. I
Oh,
didn't really talk a whole lot about the other algorithms that I've worked on besides malware are a lot more complex. We can do through Corelight, we've done things like being able to detect exfiltration through ICMP traffic and DNS traffic using information theory type of algorithms that are a lot more complex than just looking for maybe a mark on a wire for malware. And I'm happy to talk about any of these.
yeah, absolutely. Well, let's take it really quickly to Dash because you did say helping people get in. So
Sure.
what are practical resources for, like let's say Dash is like, hold on, like this guy seems interesting and he's an authority on digital forensics. Like maybe that's something I could get into. Where would you start with that?
Okay, well, the top name probably in that business that you'll want to know is Brian Carrier. He wrote a book on all the different types of file systems out there. I would recommend having that at your disposal because in digital forensics, people are going to expect that you're going to know things about file systems, and that's probably the deepest, best resource. Brian Carrier and his book and just all his work. I'm saying
This
like he
book
has
right here,
other.
right?
Yeah, he made Autopsy, which is actually a open source computer forensic tool.
Can
So
I share?
there's
Can I share a really funny, quick story with you?
sure.
Autopsy at the very beginning of the pandemic, they made it free for like 60 days. I don't know if you remember, but Autopsy was free, so you could download it. And like they were trying to do it where they're like, hey, like if you got laid off because of pandemic, like you can stay. And I'd never heard of Autopsy before, and for whatever reason, when I read it, I thought it was called Auto Spy, and for like the longest time, I was like, "Oh, Auto Spy is free right now. Like everybody got to check out this Auto Spy." And like looking back on it, as soon as someone said it's Autopsy, I'm like, "That makes sense." A because it's a forensics tool. B because like it's spelt Autopsy, not Auto Spy. And C like how long have I been walking around saying Auto Spy and just like being an idiot? But okay, sorry, Keith.
No problem. Um, so when I told you about at the very beginning, and someone asked me about research, and I said try to find the top people in whatever topic area it is that you're interested in, follow and pay attention to what they're doing. That's why I gave you Brian Carrier's name, just like I gave you Vern Pax's name earlier for the network side. Brian Carrier is basically that person in the computer forensics industry. So if you start following his work, you're going to begin to learn a lot more about it. Now, getting into it, that's getting the information, right? So you're going to learn maybe on your own how to do computer forensics or maybe through a certificate program or something like that. But then there's getting the job. And that
Mm-hmm.
really kind of depends on probably where you're at in your professional life. If you're, a younger, say, in your 20s coming out of college, I think your path is probably going to be a little different than if you're in your mid 40s getting into it, because if you're in your mid 40s, you probably would do a more of a lateral transition into a cybersecurity program. Like for me, I did a lot of more engineering type of work, and then now in my life, I'm 100% research. And that for me was a lateral shift from digital forensics to research. But if you're early in your life, I would recommend trying to link up with a company. And there's a lot of companies out there that will just need people for digital forensic grunt work, just going through file lists and things like that. And you can get experience at entry level jobs like that in order to build, I guess, your experience level to
Mm-hmm.
maybe get where it is you want to go eventually.
Well, let me ask you this, because like when I think of the industry and jobs, SOC analyst is a pretty. There's a lot of opportunity, like at the entry level or like the onboard into the industry, like SOC analyst. GRC is getting a surge because of all the regulations and the insurance is going up and everything. In the world of digital forensics, like is that a true entry point, or do you almost have to come from within the SOC and specialize out of the SOC?
I don't know. I mean, it's been so long since I've, I'm an old dude now, so it's kind of hard for me to judge because my experience is so far
Well,
in
I
the
mean, just
past. But
anecdotally, do you feel like there's a lot of entry level? I mean, I might be wrong. I mean, I know in law enforcement and stuff, digital forensics is like, in demand. And
I
maybe in
can
the,
say like,
mm,
so with Corelight, the company I work for, we take interns. there you go. There's one way you can get experience
Mm-hmm.
doing something in the cybersecurity field that, if you don't have any, um, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Availability or any jobs to go into, but you want to get the experience so you can get the jobs.
Yeah.
Being able to do intern work would get you that experience. So that's something that I see all the time. We have people that were interns that were hired where we work right now. I want to actually, I saw a chat. I'm going to interrupt you real quick.
Yeah, go.
Someone says, specifically because someone asked, is 47 years old too old to get into cybersecurity? My answer is no. I got my PhD in my 40s, so do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I tell people this all the time. Um, I don't care. Like, I've hired people. Like, I don't care how old you are. Like, can you help me? Like it's all hands on deck defending an organization. Can you do the job? Yes or no? Like, if you're 60, like, get in here. You know what I mean? Like, if you're 18, get in here. You know what I mean? It's not about what you look like. It's about the impact you can have on the organization. So yeah, we're seeing a lot of people transition out of, I don't know what's going on, and obviously it's what is it called? Like cognitive bias. Like people who I'm interfacing with are looking to get in cyber, so obviously that population's rich in content. So, but I see a lot of people like marketing, heavy equipment operator. Like I did a whole series, Keith, on it, like a rabbi, pharmacist. So it's not just like a certain demo, right? It's like young, old, former teacher.
The industry is huge.
Yeah.
The industry is absolutely huge. You could be a policy person, and that is absolutely different than what I do with malware. It's like, don't think that cybersecurity is only for nerds like me, because it is. There's so many different facets that you can get into. You can be super technical, or you could be not technical at all and just deal with policy.
Yeah, well, and don't be shy about throwing me into the nerd classification, Keith. You don't have to take that bullet by yourself. I'll gladly stand next to you on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got Chris Weaver wanted to know if Corelight's always hiring interns, or if that was like just kind of a limited run program.
I don't see. I'm going to say I'm a nerd, so I don't know all this stuff up front. That's more of an HR question, but I
It's probably on the
do
website,
know
right?
that there's like a careers section or something that you can put on there. And since Corelight is we're a research company, so everybody comes from different universities, and a lot of times the interns kind of come with the people that they know from those universities. So all I can say is apply.
I like it.
I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I like it. Is it? Oh, before I do that, is it remote? Can you be remote, or do you have to physically be there?
Everybody that I work with is remote, but I think it's a per person thing. If we're headquartered in San Francisco, so the people in San Francisco actually get the pleasure of working, if they want to, in person.
Okay. Trisha had a question for you. Trisha just started studying cyber, so relatively new. That's great. Got the GFAC, the GSEC, and studying for incident handling, and wants to get into DF or malware analysis. So like literally either section that is your wheelhouse, Keith. What do you recommend for next steps?
You need to figure out what your interest level is. If I were to look at that and I say digital forensics or malware analysis, I'm going to do malware analysis because that interests me, and I don't want that to sway in what, if digital forensics interests you, definitely do that. For me, malware analysis tended to have a deeper technical depth to the topics that I was studying, and that's why it attracted me. Now, I guess the question is what the next steps be.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure how much those certifications, I don't know them by heart with the letters there, but how much they cover digital forensics or malware analysis. The next step may be, trying to get education in those two topics. If those certifications already have those covered, then I would be talking to people in the industry and trying to, see where it is you want to land. I'm assuming you're trying to get a job. Maybe
I
reading
would
out of
think
that
so.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would be talking to people in the industry, seeing what's open. For me, LinkedIn has always been a really great tool to reconnect with people in the past, and just dig up your contacts and let them know that you have these new certifications. A lot of times people don't watch LinkedIn to see that you got them. Let them know that you have them, and maybe there's something available.
Yeah, and I would say, well, really quick programming notes. Brandon Burns over on LinkedIn's asking where are we getting these questions from. Brandon, we're pulling these from the chat. We can pull yours up too, but a lot of people are over on the YouTube right now. One thing I would say to Trisha is, like you said, for me, the best thing about cybersecurity is that it's so broad that there is absolutely something in this industry that you can be passionate about and dig into. Personally, given those two options, I like malware analysis better, right? Just subjectively speaking, in my world, in my role, I'm much more corporate facing. Definitely not a researcher. So when I don't have a large company where where like I have a SOC team and I have digital forensics. It's like usually like wearing multiple hats. So I do get to do blue stuff or defender stuff. So for me, when I encounter malware, it's a quick analysis like an any.run. It's determine infection or compromise or not. And then oftentimes, unless it's a major issue, but most of the time, it's a reimage the machine, confirm that there was no kind of like lateral movement or anything, understand how it happened, maybe put a control in place that can help prevent that from happening, and off to the next thing. It's like there's no time to do malware analysis, although I love it. It's like, to me, malware analysis is like doing like a Sudoku or a crossword. It's a lot of fun. You can really dig into it, but it could take as long as it's going to take. And unfortunately, even if I discover that this piece of malware is super awesome and it has like this crazy interesting way of exfil. Actually, I saw a really interesting piece of malware recently where they had encapsulated it a few times and then they had actually stuck like, malware that was like kind of hidden but detectable here. And then if you kept going down into the encapsulation, like 2 more levels, that was where the real malware, like the real, point of the threat actor. And they were hoping that the analyst would do all the work and get there and stop. But like, I don't have the time to do that. But if I was getting paid to do it, that would be my job. Like malware analysis is like fun, man.
There's a subtle difference between the two topics too, in that digital forensics, you can land in the legal realm. Like I've been an expert witness. I've testified in federal court on computer forensics. You've got to like that to do that job. Because it's a very adversarial, sucky environment where everybody is like trying to tell you why you're wrong. Your analysis is wrong. It's not a pleasurable experience. With malware analysis, you can sit at your desk, chew on a donut. Nobody really bothers you. You just go through the analysis and you're done. But if you do digital forensics and then they're like, oh, we need somebody to explain this to a jury, and then you got to get up there and you got to get cross-examined, and that's just a whole ball of wax too. So do know that if you go down that route, for good or for bad, that could be in your future too.
Yeah, those are all really great points. And it's nice. Thanks for sharing that, Keith. So you can kind of you don't spend 2 years getting somewhere and then you're like, oh crap, like I don't like this. It seems like kind of a waste. Oh, I love it. All right, hey, looks like we're just about out of time, Keith. I know we went through a boatload of different resources and stuff. I'd love to give you just a final thoughts opportunity here to share. Guys, definitely go out and check on Keith's website, Dr. Keith Jones. Where is it? It's one of these. Where are you, Dr. Keith? Dr. Keith Jones. It's his website, and you'll get access to his YouTube, his LinkedIn. Like you can connect with him, you can follow up all the work he's doing with the podcast, with
the categories.
And right by there. Categories, yeah, right there. His newsletter, his tools.
Sorry, nope. Right on the left-hand side, if you click categories, you will find all the stuff that I talked about, all the different topics.
Holy crap, this is a treasure trove. So, Keith, I'll give you an opportunity for final thoughts, and while you're doing that, I'll get these links and put them up for everybody.
Sure. I didn't have a ton of final thoughts, just that if you like the eCrimeBytes podcast, please drop me a line. That's just a hobby for me. It's for fun. And then on the technical aspect, if you're interested in Zeek, want to learn more about Zeek, hit me up. It's a very, very well documented program if you know where to go find the documentation. And I spent enough years that I could probably point you to the right documentation if you need to do something on Zeek, and I'd be happy to do that.
I love it. An absolute treasure to our cybersecurity community. Dr. Keith Jones, thank you so much for coming on today. It was great catching up with you too, Keith.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So to everybody in chat, thank you so much for spending an hour with us, getting to know Keith, getting to basically take advantage of all his knowledge and the resources he shared. Go check out his eCrimeBytes. If you like true crime, if you like digital, the intersection of those two is amazing. I'm Jerry from Simply Cyber. Thanks so much. Remember, tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time for the daily cyber threat briefing. Thanks, everybody. And until the next time, stay secure. Everybody, I hope you enjoyed that content. Keep the cybersecurity train going by connecting with the other Simply Cyber community resources. We have the Discord server that's lively and always keeps the conversation going. You can connect with me directly on LinkedIn. And also every single weekday morning on the Simply Cyber channel, we're doing live daily cyber threat briefings, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, as well as Thursday at 4:30 p.m. We're doing live stream interviews with industry experts, and we produce videos that we push out every Wednesday morning. I'm Jerry from Simply Cyber. I hope you enjoyed the content, and we'll